Hello and welcome to another episode on our Solidarity Against Sexual and Gender-Based Violence campaign. You are on As a Woman, a podcast by Yebetumi Initiative. Today we are talking about violence against female sex workers. To do this with me, I have Susana Date. Susana Date completed her high school education in Harvard College, Accra, Ghana. While waiting for her results, she developed an interest in volunteer work. She became a participant with Theatre for Change in 2004, a Ghanaian NGO which uses interactive theatre for education and advocacy centered on sexual and reproductive health. Since 2012, Susana has worked as project officer till 2015 for the Theatre for Change on a project where she works with female sex workers in Accra slums on sexual reproductive health and access to justice. She encourages women to explore issues that affect their lives and to advocate for behavior change in their individual lives via workshops and in their communities via radio, dramas, and interactive theatre. She has produced 3 successful radio dramas with different focus groups of female sex workers. Through her volunteer work and employment, Susana has had the opportunity to participate in international exchange programs in Belfield, I hope I got that right, in Germany, and Glasgow, Scotland, United Kingdom, and USA. Susana was also selected to be part of the Ghanaian Women Leadership Program in New York and also a fellow of the Mandela Washington Fellowship 2016. I'm also a fellow. Yeah, that's good to know. She is a proud founder of the Women of Dignity Alliance in 2016, an NGO that seeks to create a safe space for vulnerable women, that is female sex workers living in the slums, to express themselves, develop their self-esteem, and have their dignity respected. Susana holds a National Open College Network certificate in Forum Theatre, awarded by St. Mary's University, London. Susana is a proud mother of 2 lovely boys and loves reading and acting in her leisure time. Welcome, Susana.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for honoring our invitation and for availing yourself for this very sensitive but critical conversation.
You're welcome.
And also thank you so much for your years of dedication to, working with female sex workers. Somebody has to do it. It's so much needed.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that, you've dedicated your time to doing that. So you work with sex workers.
Yes.
What's a typical work day like for a female sex worker in Ghana?
Okay. So a typical work day for sex worker living in the slum community normally is a full day. Because these women that are living in the slum communities are living in brothels. And in brothels, there's no specific working day. It's like the clients come in as and when. So you are always in the brothel just waiting. So on a normal day, it could be maybe 2-3 clients. Normally, there are others that we have 2 sets of female sex workers living in the slum community. We have the roamers and the sitters. So the sitters work in the brothels and they are there from morning till evening. Okay. The roamers go out of the community to go and do sex work and then come back. So for the roamers, a typical day, in the mornings they are asleep and in the evenings they go out. But for the sitters, it's 24/7.
Okay. So there's no alternative source of livelihood for them. It's their full-time work.
It's sort of like a full-time work. Yeah.
Well, I mean, sex work is work, so I just really wanted to confirm that.
Yes. In terms of the ones I work with, these are women who have been sexually exploited as children and they were trafficked. So they've only known sex work as the only form of work. So that is what they have been doing since they were children. And then they also introduce other children. I'm saying children because in the slum community where I work in, we have as low as 10, 11 years who are being sexually exploited. And they feel it's work that the girls are doing. And they get paid as low as 2 cedis, 5 cedis for sex. So it's sort of like it's work for them because that's the only thing they've known to do.
Yeah.
That is why Woda Ghana is there. So Woda Ghana is more of like alternative livelihood
Yeah.
aside sex work. So our work is not like saying, okay, sex work is bad, so stop it. It's like you're doing sex work. How do you do it safely?
Yeah.
How do you protect yourself? And then if you intend to stop, this is an alternative that you can choose. So our work is mainly just giving the women the opportunity to make that decision for themselves. Yeah.
That's good work you're doing. It's interesting that you mentioned a lot of them were basically trafficked into sex work.
Yeah.
What are some of the circumstances surrounding their getting into sex work? I mean, the trafficking situation, you work with them, so I'm sure you know their stories. What are some of the circumstances? How does this happen?
It's mainly poverty because most of the women I have worked with were sort of like told, there's no money. And so they were told, let's go to the big city and then you go and learn a vocation. So it's always about learning a vocation. It's not about going to the city to learn, to go to school
Yeah.
or to go and do business. It's about going to learn a vocation. And then, so they are brought in. And then, so when they are housed, they feel like, okay, they are grooming us to take us to go and learn the vocation. And that is how the sexual exploitation starts. So it's mainly poverty. Like there's not no money at home. The older ones that are not really trafficked, but are doing it as a result of, teenage mothers, and they need to make ends meet. And so they go into it because it's quick money.
Yeah.
And they can be able to, send money back home, afford taking care of themselves. There are even women that are living in the brothels with their children. And they are doing sex work in front of their children because that's the only accommodation they can even afford.
Yeah. So the older women, do they own the spaces they live in, or is it there is a manager and you rent this place, they rent for you and you?
So we have brothel owners. Okay. Most of the brothels are built by other people. So the women are living in sheds, like in rooms.
Yeah.
And they pay. It's not like how we have accommodation outside the slum where you pay maybe 2 years or 1 year. These ones you pay weekly.
Yeah.
There are some you pay daily. So it's a small wooden room that you have to pay weekly or daily for. So the brothel owners come around to collect their monies.
Yeah.
If you don't make sales that week and you want to use sex as a means of exchanging, paying for it, that is also allowed.
They're open to doing that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very eye opening for me. I know a lot. I mean, I've listened to a lot of stories about sex workers, and this part hasn't ever come up. But let's get to the part where for a lot of the younger women, their introduction into sex work is violence. Like you're trafficked, you're basically lied to, and you get here and you are forced into sex work. So it starts as a form of violence.
Yes.
And abuse.
Yes.
And violation of their rights. How does violence look like for female sex workers? In what forms does it manifest in their line of work?
The women I have worked with go through abuse and violence on daily basis. One is the fact that, they can get killed at any time, especially those who go for roaming.
Have you had any experiences with any of the people you work with?
We lost one of our women. She's actually a peer educator. A couple of I think last year, she went for roaming. She's normally a sitter, but she got a big client and she went and we couldn't get into contact with her for I think about 3 weeks. We were trying to contact her, but we couldn't until we later found out that she's been killed. And so it was very traumatic for some of our women. So it happens.
Did you ever find out who did it or how it happened?
Yeah.
Did the legal system ever follow up? Was it?
There's no even legal system to tackle an issue with. Well, it's in that community where they come from, in that slum community. I don't want to mention the communities for security's sake, but
yeah, sure.
People get killed on daily basis, and it doesn't really matter because it's a slum.
By people, you mean the female sex workers?
Women, yes. And
so this is a thing that happens on the regular.
Yeah, it happens.
And no law enforcement is trying to stop this.
Because it's a slum and no one cares what happens to people in the slum community. And there are instances where some of them has been arrested by the police and they have sex with them and then they release them. There's
what's usually the basis of the arrest?
They normally I had that experience one time in the community where the police came in for, we call it scatter. So they come into the community when allegedly they want money. So they come to where the brothels are and then they say they are arresting the women. So of course, if it's a brothel, of course, when you go in, you go and find people having sex.
Yeah.
So they arrest the women and leave the clients that were on top of the women. And they take the women and then take monies from them.
This is how you know they are not really into to implement the law. So Ghana's Criminal Code of 1960, Act 29, says that, prostitution is a crime. And it's not just a crime for the person selling the sex. It's also the person soliciting. Soliciting is also a crime. So it's interesting and also we know that it's sexist and misogynistic to go say, I'm coming to implement the law. What you're doing is a crime. And then you arrest the woman and leave the man.
Yeah.
When in that particular instance, they are both breaching the law.
You sometimes when I'm having conversations with the women, especially those who often get arrested, some of the police will come in not in their police uniform and start soliciting with the women, and then when the women give in, the arrest. So the code, the criminal code or the law say the person who is soliciting or the person who is using the gains from the sex work, has done the wrong thing. Yeah. So the police that goes in and pretend to solicit, why is that person not being arrested?
Then they will say they're doing their jobs.
No. And then you and we are all here in Ghana. We see on the news when there's sweep, when there's arrests of in brothels, and all we see are the women.
True. Yeah.
But if the law says the person is soliciting, you cut the person in the act, why don't you arrest the two of them? Why just take one?
That's why, it's the implementation of the law has become very gendered. We know that even it's not only women who sell sex in Ghana, men sell sex in Ghana. There are male sex workers.
Yes.
But nobody is out there trying to arrest male sex workers. The target is always on the female sex workers. Yeah. And this is what makes their work more risky and also allows for more violence to be perpetrated against them.
Yeah.
You're talking about loss of lives. I have heard situations where some of them are brutally beaten by clients and just by regular people who think sex work is a crime. It's a moral, it's wrong morally, and they're trying to destroy our society. And so they just beat them up for that reason that you are morally decayed. You are destroying our society. So they beat them up. Yeah. When this happens, are there any avenues for redress for the sex workers? Are they able to go to law enforcement to report? What do they usually do to get some protection or to prevent this from happening to them?
Yeah. So there are a lot of women in the sex work business, if I should put it that way. And then there are the ones that are fortunate enough that becomes members of WODA. So as part of most of our projects, we have implementations where we work with the police. And in the communities that we work in, we've trained some police to address issues of sex workers and make sure that their cases are followed up. And so, as part of those trainings, we have referrals that we give to the women that are in our organizations. That if such thing happens, they have that referral form and they take it to the police station, and their cases are followed up as women and not as sex workers, because that comes first. Them being women and them being human beings, those two comes first before the work they even do. So that's what we look at.
How successful has that been?
It has been very successful. It has been very successful.
So what happens to the sex workers who do not have this protection that you provide through your organization?
Well, we reach out to sex workers who are not in our organization through the radio drama, like you mentioned, through our interactive theater, in a way of creating awareness that they can also walk into the police station and report abuse. It's not just the ones that we are working with. Because if you walk into the police station and you say, I'm a sex worker, then you have an issue.
Yeah.
But if you walk into the police station and you're a woman who has been abused and you speak like that, I'm sure your case will be followed up.
So I'm just trying to summarize what you just said. So if you're a sex worker who suffers any form of abuse in your line of work, you cannot go to the police station to say, this happened to me because I'm a sex worker, or I was doing this work and this happened to me.
Yes.
So there is technically no protection for female sex workers.
Yes, because
as female sex workers.
Yes, because in our law it says it's illegal. So of course, a thief cannot just walk into the police station and say, I went to steal from someone and I was beaten up.
Yeah.
Of course, you'll be arrested.
Yeah.
So you always have to put you being a woman first and you being a human being first. And then we address that first before you even come to look at what you were doing when you were abused.
Has there been any instances where any of the female sex workers have been in any abusive situation and said, I cannot go and report this?
A lot.
Because it happened to me whilst I was doing this.
A lot.
Would you say this contributes to the level of abuse that's perpetuated on sex workers? Do you think people know that, okay, even if I abuse you, you can't report it, and so that's made people that's emboldened abusers to target sex workers? Would you say that?
I would tell you one thing about sex workers and abuse. These women have seen so much abuse to the extent that their only answer to any form of protection is attack. So even before this woman will say, okay, I'm going to the police station to go and report the abuse, that person might have even fought you already. So they are doing, because they are being abused on a daily basis, they are doing everything to protect themselves.
Yeah.
So that's what happens.
So instead of their right to she's laughing. Instead of their right to not be harmed being respected, they've had to resort to being their own protectors.
Yes, because the law does not protect them. The police does not protect them.
Let's talk about healthcare. I know for their line of work, they need maximum healthcare.
Yes.
Right? How easy is it for them to have access to services and information, healthcare services and information as sex workers?
It doesn't happen. It's not easy. Because most of for instance, the communities I work in, there's no health center. And most of our health centers that are closer is general. So if a sex worker has an STI and wants to go in, it's a general population.
Yeah.
So it's difficult for that person to just walk in. And normally, sex workers is their looks that they use to do their work. So it doesn't matter if the person is going to a hospital, or it doesn't matter whether the person is going to access health services. They look different. And they get
That's true.
stigmatized for looking different and coming to the hospital wearing maybe a short skirt or, that sort of. So they don't even go to the to the health centers if they have to. They resort to getting their services from the pharmacies. And so we run, the services, the ones that we are trained to
Yeah.
do, like HIV testing and counseling, condom distribution, but we don't run the screenings because we don't have the facilities to do that. So we always have to refer to a clinic and make sure someone follows up. So we've worked with a particular clinic where we have a nurse that we have trained who looked at all our female sex workers that comes in for the services. So whenever anyone wants to go into that clinic, we have to call the nurse and see one of our women is coming, if you can take care of that person.
Yeah, it's amazing that you're doing this work. I'm just thinking about why it should happen that people, I mean, they are part of the general population. They shouldn't feel unwelcome in any hospital. So
Well, we actually call them key population, so they're not like part of the general population.
yeah, so what I'm saying is we should get to a point where they don't have to, be a specialized, like a special group of people, right? If we get to the point, and well, let me not jump ship, we'll get to that point later in the discussion. But now let's talk about, it even ties into what I was saying. How do we get to the point where the female sex workers can very easily walk into a clinic to access service? They can, when they are abused in their line of work, they can go to law enforcement like everybody else and say, this person did that, and that to me, and they would be attended to without any discrimination. How do we get there?
So I think it's, how do I put it? Like I said, we have the general, let me call it the OPD, where
Yeah,
anyone can
outpatient
just
department. Yeah,
walk in for services. We can have something like that for, I don't want to mention key population, but for, any other sexual reproductive health issue that is not malaria or,
yeah,
you know, any other diseases.
yeah,
So, for instance, if I should cite example with the Osha clinic that is in the community, they have the adolescent health
yeah,
that
yeah.
focus for just adolescents. So if you have something like that, the women can just walk in and
Yeah.
access the services
Yeah.
because they need special treatments, they
Yeah.
need special services, they need time. So
Let's look at the bigger picture. I mean, I am totally for the clinic idea. It's good to have dedicated services because, of course, their work is different. I shouldn't say their work is different. I mean, their work requires more attention in that regard. Let's look at the bigger picture. We are a very judgmental society. Like you said, if we weren't that judgmental about sex work, they wouldn't have had to have challenges going to the hospital. They wouldn't have had to have challenges going to the police station to get their issues reported. They wouldn't even have had challenges to say, this person kidnapped me from here, or this person lied to me that they were going to give me this job and I came and they're making me do this. How do we get to the point where, they don't have to feel ashamed about anything? That, how do we get society to be more accepting and understand that, sex work is work? Because it is work.
yes, the bigger picture.
Yeah.
It's still very big because it's not everybody that will accept sex work. It's a moral thing. And Ghana, as a Christian, whatever.
We're actually a secular state. We keep saying we're a Christian country, but we are not.
It's not really going to accept that. And for me, I feel it starts with the individual. If the women are able to accept themselves, that's fine by me.
How do you accept yourself in a society that hates you, that doesn't accept you?
Well, I don't really want
Because
to call it
they
hate.
exist in a society,
Yes.
and they are functioning members of the society.
Yes.
And they cannot be their own islands.
Yes. But if these women are able to stand up for themselves, that changes the narrative.
Okay.
You understand? So if their confidence, their self-esteem is built up, and they can just walk into any place, that is okay. Because no matter what we do, it will not be accepted.
Okay. So when they have done the work on themselves, what do we have to do, the rest of us, to ensure that when they step into these spaces, they are not being shunned?
That is for the rest of us as individuals to work on accepting them, because they cannot force us to accept them.
Right. Let's talk about the law. All of us are able to enjoy freedom, safety, healthcare, everything we enjoy because it's enshrined in a constitution. As human beings, we have the right to, and so we enjoy that. Is there any form of legislation that you would recommend should be in place to protect sex workers from abuse, either by their families, by their clients, by co-workers, by partners, because some of them do get married and have kids, and some of them are in relationships, of course. What legislation would you recommend to ensure that they are protected wherever they are or exist as people and as sex workers?
It's just one sentence: for sex work to be decriminalized, because that is the only thing that can help these women. Making it legal, it's a future things.
You are not hopeful at all.
It's not I'm not hopeful. It's not I'm not hopeful. It's just that we know the country we are living in, and getting something to be legal in the next 2, 3, 4 years, it's not something that can happen, especially when it has to do with something that we consider immoral. So if someone is having sex with someone and the person is arrested and treated as criminal, what is the crime in what the person did? So let's look at taking the criminal aspects out of it, and then we work our way up to legalization.
So yours is decriminalize sex work.
Yes.
What does decriminalizing mean? For anyone listening who isn't familiar with the term.
It just means you don't treat a sex worker like you treat
an armed robber?
A thief. Yeah.
Okay, so I totally agree with your recommendation, and that's what a lot of us activists have been fighting for, that the first step is decriminalization, because the moment, and that is what has been happening, making it a crime opens the door to
anybody to
violence, anybody to abuse them, because they know that if I abuse you, what you're doing is a crime.
Wrong, yes.
And if I abuse you, you're going to report me to the police. But you can't go to the police because what you're doing is a crime. So that's been the door opener to a lot of abuse against sex workers. So I totally agree with you. Any last words, Susana, before we wrap up? Susana.
Last words. I think my last word has come up in most of my sayings, that the fact that these are women just like you and me, and it's just fortunate that they find themselves in this line of work. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's the line of work where they find themselves just so they can make ends meet. So first, they should be treated as one, as human being and as women.
As human beings and as women. Thank you so much, Susana.
Thank you.
I've been talking to Susana Date. She's the founder, the proud founder, proud founder of the organization. Oh, my. Okay. Sorry. Please pause on that for me. Okay.
Women of Dignity Alliance.
Yes. See, technology. I've been talking to Susana Date, who is the proud founder of the Women of Dignity Alliance, WODA, and she's shared like very, really interesting perspectives on female sex workers in the slum communities she works in. And these communities are in Accra, right? Yeah, in Accra, and the kinds of violence they face and how they're able to seek redress. And of course, her way forward is that we decriminalize sex work so that these women can be protected, they can have access to good health care and have improved livelihoods. I will conclude by saying that it's for all of us to understand that sex work is work. It is for government to understand this, first of all, that sex work is work. These women are putting in their all to make this work. They're earning a living. They exist because there is a need for their services. They're providing a service, and there are people who seek these services, and it is work. We should work towards removing the moral veil we've put on sex work, that, it's immoral, because mainly that's the argument for making sex work illegal, because it's immoral. We should, start with the understanding that sex work is work, and the women who do this are doing, a job that they require getting paid for. And so totally agree with the legislature. Let's start with decriminalizing sex work. I am quite hopeful for legalizing, but like Susana said, it will take a while, but I'm so open to that. And for anyone who encounters sex workers, whether it's seeking their services, being their relative, being their friend, just being an acquaintance, understand that these are women with rights. These are women who deserve to be free from abuse, to be free from any form of violence, being it verbal, be it physical, be it emotional. Any form of violence against sex workers is equally a crime. They have a right to live in dignity. They have a right to work in dignity. They have a right to participate in society like everybody else and seek services, information, education, whatever their human needs are. This is where we wrap up on this episode. Catch us again next time for another episode on our solidarity against sexual and gender-based violence campaign that is proudly supported by the African Women's Development Fund. Bye.